Has the Cold War suddenly come roaring back to life? It's been almost 4 weeks since Russia launched its attack on Georgia, but now the crisis is deepening, the positions hardening, and the rhetoric getting hotter. Joining me now is the President of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili. President Saakashvili, welcome.
Thank you, Farid. Very happy to be on your show.
Let me ask you first, are Russian troops still in Georgia beyond the security zone that, at least in their interpretation, is allowed in the agreement that the two of you signed?
Look, French document was a ceasefire document, and we were strictly willing and are still adhering to every point of it, except that Russians have violated every point of it. Now, of course, we need a ceasefire, and of course, Georgia is keeping ceasefire even if Russia is violating that on a daily basis. But what we need in longer term is European 21st century civilized democratic solutions for the conflicts of 20th century. We don't need brutal 18th, 19th century solutions as we've seen it, Russians trying to do it during the last few days. What we have here is not quest for minority rights or for protecting some of their citizens. What we have is under the false pretenses and false claims, invasion of an independent country with the purpose of first to destroy its government, to undermine its economy, and to dismember its territory. It's so clear. You know, I saw a Washington Post article today that was very efficient in demoting and destroying the Russian lies. And I can only agree with what they had to say, and I can add the big things to that list as well.
Let me ask you about how this all began. As you know, there is some controversy about it. And I want to ask you very specifically, because many of the people who support you and support the strong Western response toward Georgia feel, in Carl Bildt's words, the foreign minister of Sweden, that you made a tactical blunder. The Financial Times, which has a lengthy, almost hour-by-hour accounting of the events, says there is little evidence to support Georgia's claim that Russian tanks went into the separatist enclave ahead of Georgian forces. In other words, the position basically being said is, while there were clashes of various kinds, you went in first on August 7th.
First of all, we are a democracy. And, you know, I think one of the main advantages of democracy, that things are transparent and truth always comes out. And we are ready to have any kind of impartial international commission investigating what led to a conflict and how it has erupted. And I have to be very clear about it. It's not about Russians being there or when they entered. Russians have been there for many years already. You know, Saakashvili was governed by several Russian generals. The commander of the Russian army that entered through that rocky tunnel served before as defense minister of so-called government of South Ossetia. So, you know, it's not about where Russians came in. Russians came in that night en masse through tunnel with their tanks. But before they came in through the tunnel, Saakashvili was under direct military control of the Russians. Most of Abkhazia was under direct military control of the Russians. The officials that were saying that they're South Ossetian separatists were basically on-duty Russian generals, not retired ones. Those that were sent in Russia were directly administering against every international law and standard this conflict area. And of course, yes, they entered through Rocky Tunnel. One day before 7th of August, they officially took under protection the Rocky Tunnel and took out, expelled the so-called local separatist irregulars, and the Russian border guards officially controlled also the other side of the tunnel. So there was every sign of international aggression. But prior to that, for all these months, I've been warning our counterparts in the West and in the worldwide that Russians are doing military buildup. Russians have been, widening the port in Abkhazia, where nobody lives, for their Black Sea fleet to enter. Russians brought in railway troops up to Abkhazia to build railway obviously to carry through tanks and heavy equipment. Russians clearly brought in paratroopers in front, and already then Georgia had all the rights to react because it was a clear act of international aggression. Unfortunately, nobody else really did much to deter this. So when we are talking about the build-up, when we are talking about preparation of all this, it has been this long, long story. It didn't start on 7th of August. It culminated on 7th of August. And again, about 7th of August, we are willing to have any commission investigating that. However, the point is that let's not take it out of context. You know, for first time, President Putin told me, and I announced it publicly because I didn't want to be bullied in secret, that he would make aggression against Georgia in the fall of 2006, straight after they introduced all-out trade embargo on Georgia. Since then, especially for the last 1 year, we've been seeing this military buildup, preparations, grumbles, noises they made all around the world that they're preparing for this. And, you know, we are where we are. But, you know, it hasn't started on 7th of August, certainly, and it has a long history to it, and it will not end, unfortunately, with Georgia, I'm afraid so, and so we have to be very careful.
Let me ask you, Mr. President, how you envision the end game of this crisis. Abkhazia and Southern Ossetia have been disputed territories ever since Georgia declared its independence. In fact, the civil war began in some ways in 1990, a year before Georgia declared independence. Do you want that Abkhazia and Southern Ossetia be reincorporated into Georgia proper with no international peacekeepers, even if the views of the Abkhazians and the South Ossetians are that they do not want to be part of Georgia?
Farid, let's make it very clear. Whom do you call South Ossetians and Abkhazians? Because that's one of another cliches that, you know, Russians have tried to sell to the world and to simplify the issue. Here is the population of South Ossetia prior to 7th of August. You see the green lines, there are areas under Russian direct control, so-called separatist administration, and the other lines are those that were under Georgian control. Now, Georgian-controlled areas were ethnically mixed, and they were administered by former South Ossetian separatists who basically switched sides. This is the guy that fought against us in the war you mentioned in the early 90s. And all those main separatists
switch sides in what sense?
And they moved.
Switch sides meaning?
They negotiated autonomy with Georgia's central government, and they were regarded as worst enemies by the Russians. And these were ethnically mixed places, and you know we didn't have any problems with it. We had all the language rights and autonomy rights, and we've been very, very open and flexible with those people.
Do you dispute that when these two republics declared independence this week, there was widespread rejoicing on the streets? International journalists reported that when this happened, they were happy. Is that because all that's left are the separatists?
I mean, first of all, certainly there was rejoicing by Sudeten Germans when Germany entered Czechoslovakia and first annexed Sudetenland. There was rejoicing of some ethnic Russians when they were expelling already in Stalin's time, you know, Germans from Kaliningrad, Königsberg, and when they were expelling Finns from Karelia, when Stalin annexed, you know, biggest province of Finland. Now, when we talk about solution of these issues, they should be based on several issues. First of all, wide autonomy, rights for ethnic groups, and Georgia has very good track record of democracy and giving individual and group rights to different groups. I myself personally, I've been, you know, I started my career as minority rights expert at the Norwegian Institute of Human Rights. I feel very strongly about minorities. But, you know, you cannot allow to expel majority and then claim that those who stay behind, they no longer want to let back majority. Everybody has to have rights. And everybody has to be has right to security. That's why we need genuine international peacekeeping force. What Russians were doing there for all these years, they were doing peacekeeping in terms of keeping peace here and peace there of the former empire. We need genuine international peacekeeping. We need European Union peacekeepers on the ground. We need genuine democratic procedure. We need to allow people to get back to their houses. Right now, as we talk, you know, you say, you know, what about those people? What about those people that are being thrown from their houses as we speak right now from the area called Akhalgori next to South Ossetia, where it was totally under Georgian government control. Last villages are being emptied right now. Of course, tomorrow somebody might move in, shoot Kalashnikov in there, say, oh, I'm happy, we are independent, we just got rid of all the others. But this is not the way civilized humanity can accept it.
But let me ask you then the end game, because do you really think that Russia will not just return to the status quo ante, but actually withdraw its peacekeepers from Southern Ossetia and Abkhazia when it has now officially recognized them? I mean, in other words, is the demand you're making one that is realistically achievable?